in that Press Ganey report, they recently said that patients rely on digital sources 3.1 times more than provider referrals. So some of those sources are going to be directory listings.
Hey there, welcome to the Dr. Marketing Tips Show. I am Jennifer.
And I'm Corey.
And today we're going to talk about how we can help healthcare professionals just like you and practice owners navigate the ever-changing world of digital marketing. In fact, we're going to dive into something that often gets overlooked. It's always an after the fact when we're sending in reports and saying here, traffic's up or traffic's down. That is SEO strategy. We're going to talk about something that is super simple that you're probably already doing but didn't realize that they kind of connect together. That's directory listings and how we're using directory listings to boost your local search rankings and bring more patients to your practice.
Yeah, so when it comes to directory listings, those are things like Google, Yelp, Bing, Apple Maps, all of those, but exactly. And they have an impact on SEO, which we're going to talk about, but they also have sort of a broader impact on how your practice looks, sort of the first impression. So, obviously you want to make sure that everything looks right and is accurate, but also they really do impact the SEO rankings and can have a broader effect on all this content that you're doing and all this money you've spent on your website. But if your directory listings aren't correct, you could be shooting yourself in the foot, so to speak, before you even get out of the gate. So we're going to talk through a couple ways that you can make sure that everything is correct, common mistakes that we see, and then some tips to optimize those listings. But before
I was going to say, we know that people this is how they're finding your practice. And it directly ties to SEO. And we know that there's some key stats out there that have come out recently from Press Ganey and Stat Healthcare that specifically are saying this is how patients are finding us. And those stats really should drive home how important this is to your bottom line.
Yeah, absolutely. So in that Press Ganey report, they recently said that patients rely on digital sources 3.1 times more than provider referrals. So some of those sources are going to be directory listings. And on those listings, there's also reviews. And so if you've been listening to this show for a while, you know that we always harp on the importance of reviews. And it's because, again, according to Press Ganey, the average consumer looks at 5 reviews and visits 2 to 3 different directory listing sites before choosing a provider. And then again, when they're looking at reviews, they say that 81% of patients are reading these things. And when you have between 4 and 4.9 stars, your clinic is going to earn the most revenue. So you've got to have the reviews, you've got to have the listings because people are searching for those. And then they have to be accurate because if they're not accurate, then it impacts the SEO. So it all kind of comes together that way.
Yeah, and we know for a fact that they are a big driver as it relates to ROI on your marketing, because we've done a couple tests where we've thrown call tracking on our ads and also on pieces of content that are being boosted organically, and then directory listings. And when we look at the case studies, we have that one that we did, I think it was over a 4-month period of time or something to that effect, where it generated like $250,000 in surgical revenue directly from the directory listings. And so I think that sometimes practices think they've got, a review strategy, they've got a partner that's handling it. But if you're not really leaning into optimizing, paying real attention to the directory listings, which is kind of like the powerhouse behind the review, if you're not really optimizing those, you're leaving opportunities on the table. And that's what I really want to dive into, is it's not just having a partner for review management. It's also making sure that the machine is turning and it's optimized to bring you as much potential traffic as possible.
Yeah, think of it like the reviews are a part of the directory listings, but sort of the entire piece, the entire vehicle that's going to drive this thing forward is the directory listing, right? So Let's back up for a second and just kind of talk through what we're talking about. So again, these are the profiles that you see on like Google Business, Healthgrades, WebMD, Yelp, ZocDoc, all of those different things. That's what we're talking about when we are discussing directory listings. Those are essentially the digital equivalent of a phone book listing. You can claim those. You can go in and you can update the information. Where it gets, where it kind of coalesces with what we're talking about for SEO is the fact that you can help Google confirm your business info, which will improve your rankings in local search. So in other words, if you have on your website, for example, and you say, I'm at 123 Main Street, Suite 200. And on your directory listing, it says, and this sounds silly, but it's true. It says 123 Main Street, and then you abbreviate street and suite. Those are different, and that can actually impact your ranking. And that's something that not a lot of people talk about. So when we're talking about the impact of these listings, it's things like that, where yes, you want everything to be accurate, of course. You want to have all your insurances listed. You want to have all your locations listed. You want to have proper phone numbers, the obvious stuff. But you also need to make sure that everything is the same across not just the Google listing, but all of these listings. And that's where it can become a headache, because like I mentioned, let's just take, for example, you've got Google Business, Healthgrades, WebMD, Yelp, ZocDoc, right? That's 5 right there. And that's 5 profiles to maintain to make sure that they all say the exact same thing.
Yeah, and I will say, so I was at I've been going through a process of having conversations with the other kind of third-party vendors that help manage directory listings and reputation and management in general for a handful of our clients. We're looking to make some changes. And so I've gone through with each one of them talking about like a comprehensive suite that we could then work directly with them on behalf of our clients. And I will say, apples to apples, they are not all the same. And many times you might be thinking that you're getting a comprehensive tool that's going to manage your directory listings and kind of really answer kind of the challenges that you just said, like making sure that everything's correct across the board. And I'm finding, that 70, 80% of the time, what the tool that they're delivering on isn't doing all of this for you. You're paying potentially for reputation management. It's doing some level of it, but it's not really diving in and really optimizing for SEO. And so this is something that I think practice leaders need to understand. You may think you've checked the box on reputation management, which includes directory listings, but that's not always the case. In fact, some vendors do reputation reviews. They don't touch directories. And so I think it's really important that we look at what we have in place just to make sure we're not leaving those opportunities on the table.
Yeah, exactly. They're 2 different things. And I think at a glance, you may not consider them so. And so you're absolutely right. You sign up and you think, oh yeah, I've got the review thing taken care of. They said something about managing Google Business. Okay. But there's, again, I named 5 sites earlier. There's probably 65 sites that all relate to this, and where actually Google will pull info from to verify that things are correct. And so if you are not paying attention to those things, or your vendor isn't, or your vendor maybe has a dashboard and they don't actually fix those things, maybe you just get a little red light that tells you that something is wrong, but then it's kind of up to you to figure out. Those are the things that can have a ripple effect and create issues. Because at the end of the day, I think it all comes back to just wanting to be consistent. So there's this thing called name, address, and phone number, NAP, that Google kind of goes off of when it comes to directories. And so if you don't have this consistent NAP, you will not potentially show up as high. Whereas if your NAP matches across all the directory listings on your website, on your social, typically that translates directly into higher local rankings. And when you rank higher locally, that will help you show up over your competitors. That's an easy thing to do, but again, it's a step that's often missed.
Yeah. What are some of the mistakes that people oftentimes make that maybe they don't even realize that they're not making?
Well, I think the first one that we see all the time is inconsistent or outdated info. So we've seen this multiple times where someone will go in, you'll update the information, and then you just kind of forget about it because, you know, you get busy and life happens. And then a couple months later, we saw this a couple years ago, actually, a health system went in, reclaimed the profiles, and then changed the phone number to be their main intake line. And there was no alert to this practice that had occurred. They are not associated with this hospital. I think they had surgical privileges there, but outside of that, you know, totally independent group. And it's things like that where if someone wasn't paying attention, well, that creates all kinds of issues because, again, going back to that NAP, your phone number is one of the most important trust signals and indicators that this information is correct. And if you're not paying attention to that, or it's outdated, or you know, whatever the case may be, then that creates a huge issue. And so, you know, at minimum, I would say check listings every couple of months to ensure that they're still accurate.
I would say too, I've got a neuro group that we work with, and they have privileges at a local hospital, but they're independent. And there are so many times, at least once a month, where we get a ownership request to transfer ownership from the practice to the hospital. And if you weren't paying attention to it and you had somebody that wasn't really like focused on making sure that you maintain ownership, it would be very easy to lose ownership of your profile, which if you've ever gone through that process, it is such a PIA, like just to get through to figure, like just to get ownership, because that's the key piece. And you could lose it to the hospital. That would be a very easy mistake to make with tremendous consequences of you having to backtrack and imagine trying to find the right person at the hospital to get that ownership from.
Well, and also just going back to Google, they ultimately don't care. So
Yeah,
it's not like you can call up Joe
Nope.
Google and say, hey man, I missed this. Can you just set it back? The
Nope.
answer, first of all, yeah, you're not going to, you can't call them.
You're not talking to someone.
So it's right. Yeah, you're not talking to somebody. It's going to be a problem. Next mistake, and I think it's really kind of like two parts. One is not claiming the listings. And then the second part of this mistake is not optimizing the descriptions and services within them. And they kind of go hand in hand. So again, you've got a handful of directories that you're probably aware of, and then a bunch that you're not. And so when you don't claim and verify these things, what'll often happen is the platform, let's use Yelp as an example, still wants to have information because Yelp still wants people to go and kind of use them as an information source. So if you don't control that listing, you're leaving it up to essentially the Yelp algorithm to go scrape some information from a bunch of different places, put it together, and hope that it's right without any real oversight. So you can see what the problem would be there if you're not claiming your listing. On top of that, all of these different sites have a bunch of different places where you can add services, descriptions, keywords, photos. I mentioned earlier, you can add your accepted insurances on Google now, for example. You can even connect a book an appointment button on Google for some EHRs that'll help you book directly. All of that is available to you. All of that is free, but you have to have the listing claimed to do that. So if you're not claiming the listing, then you're probably not optimizing the services that are there, or the new service line, new doctor, whatever the case may be. And on Google, when you have the listings claimed, you can even do announcements. So it's like an extra opportunity to say, hey, welcome to our new provider, or our new office opened, or we're going to be closed next Thursday for whatever reason. So it's just by not doing that, you're creating a lot of issues that you don't have to.
And remember, when you're doing directories, every provider and every office that you have has its own listing. So you're not just doing this for one for your practice. You're doing this just depending on your size. It could be 5, it could be 500. And it's significant. And that's why you always need a vendor to help you with this, is you want to go to somewhere that you have a dashboard, and you need to be working with your vendor, because they're going to do this. They're going to optimize to a certain level, but it's still going to be incumbent upon you as the practice to make sure that you're paying attention to it and providing that direction for the vendor. But I did a talk at MGMA recently, and I was talking about directory listings, not about this in particular, but I was showing, like, back in the day, it was super easy to manage this process. But now, your directories have that trickle down effect. And so if you're just focusing, let's say, on Google, and you're a mid-sized practice, you could have thousands of these listings that are all interconnected from an SEO standpoint. And so, like, you do need that kind of help to make sure that you've got this thing covered. It could be a full-time job for one person,
Right.
depending on the size of the practice.
And then on top of that, we kind of mentioned earlier, and I don't want to harp on reviews too much because we've got plenty that does that, but reviews are an important part here, and they are connected to the listings. And if you, like you said, if maybe you're just paying attention to the Google listings and you're ignoring patient reviews on some of these other platforms, by not responding to these reviews, whether positive or negative, that can have an impact as well. If you respond to each one, obviously that will boost trust and engagement with potential patients, but it also allows you to pull in those reviews, use them in your marketing, use them on your website. And that also is a trust indicator for search. So again, when it comes back to the SEO aspect of these listings, having reviews and then you being an active participant in these reviews will help local listings as well. So by ignoring them, again, this is a free thing you can do to help drive patients literally to your practice.
I just think it's one of those things you can't ignore anymore. Like, it's another layer to making sure that you're optimized for patients to find you at the right time, at the right place, right when they're looking for you.
Yeah, absolutely. So I think let's take a few minutes and talk through just a couple of tips. So obviously you need to make sure that you've got everything claimed. I think that kind of goes without saying. And then leverage the posts. Like I said, you can actually use some of these posts on Google to post updates about services, or maybe you're going to be at an event, you're going to be at a local community event going on. Google loves this fresh content. So if you can use this as another opportunity to take up more space on the results page, that space that your competitor can't have. So again, there's active and passive benefits to doing this. And I think posting is one of those. Another tip would be use high quality images and videos. The listings with really good photos get 42% more clicks than those without. And on top of that, again, think of this as kind of a website almost within these search engines. So if you are putting in the work, you're doing the SEO there, you're going to have that sort of downstream benefit. And if you're going to do the work, you're going to make sure that the listings are updated, the services are right. Why not make sure that you're also putting your best foot forward and you've got your best photos and videos out there too?
Corey, like, it's not just your headshots, because a lot of times, like, especially, like, I keep harping on these vendors because we work with vendors, you work with vendors, everyone works with vendors. Some of this is personal responsibility too. Your vendor doesn't know what your most recent photos are. I had a doctor reach out to me recently and he was spot on. He goes, "Hey, can you add some of these photos of me in surgery? Not the gross photos, but just some surgery photos showing that he's like high touch and high value and, like, leading edge." And so we added them because that came from him. But those types of photos are great. And then I would say, like, patient testimonials, you could load up there for a specific doctor, for the practice, for things like that, because you just said it. You want to own as much of that space as possible. And a lot of times, like, you get a testimonial, you put it on your website, you put it on, social, but you don't remember that Google is also social. And kind of like you just said, it's its own website. You have to treat it that way.
Right. And again, reviews are a part of this. So I would say, obviously you want to get listed on all the medical specific ones, but then on top of that, you want to encourage reviews here. So the directory piece of it is making sure you've got it all claimed, making sure it's all accurate, it all matches. And then the other piece of it is the review side, where, more reviews equals more credibility. It equals more credibility to your potential patients and to other directory listings and search engines at large. So that's why what we were saying a few minutes ago, where you probably it could be a full-time job, or you've got a vendor that can kind of do this for you or do parts of it for you. It will really make your life a lot easier. And again, help fill the clinic without directly just paying for ads. And it is such a vital piece of the marketing mix now. And then the last piece of advice that I would offer is to track performance. So you can do that directly on dashboards with Google Search Console or Google Business, and each one of these platforms, again, because if you claim your listing, you also unlock the ability to have some type of analytic report. There's some other things that you can do to really like dive in, but I think minimum, make sure that you have it claimed, and then you actually go in and you look at some of these dashboards, because they'll tell you how many impressions that you're getting, what the click-through rate is on these, what buttons are being clicked. And that's really valuable information that you can use when you're determining what the next phase of your strategy is.
Absolutely. So I think this is a good place to maybe, put a pin in it. But I think that the biggest takeaway here is, you thought you had everything covered for reviews and directories, but, like you just said, they are two different things. But if you want to really dominate from an SEO standpoint, this is SEO 3.0. There's all kinds of other things that we do from an SEO standpoint that are relevant to helping, boost your online profile and boost your digital footprint. But if you really want to have traction in 2025, this is what you need to be focusing on.
Yeah, agreed. And again, it's a great way to see positive benefits. And once you kind of do that initial legwork, and obviously you'll have to check in on it every now and then, but once that legwork is done, it's going to keep working for you 24/7, 365.
That's right. So with that, I'm Jennifer.
I'm Corey.
We'll see you next time on the Dr. Marketing Tips Show. Thanks a bunch.
Bye, guys.
If you want more like this, hit like and subscribe so you'll always be alerted to new episodes when they come out. And if you want information about us, visit us over at insightmg.com. That's insightmg.com. We'll see you on the next episode.